Marcus didn't rush to answer. Instead, he reached forward slightly, resting his forearm on his knee. His voice was calm, almost grounding. Grief doesn't come with instructions. There's no right way, no wrong way. You don't have to. Figure out tomorrow right now. Today, it's enough to breathe, to eat, to let yourself feel. Emily's tears slipped down her cheeks freely. She wasn't sobbing, just crying quietly, the way someone does when they finally feel safe enough to let the pain out. Kay covered her face with her hands, embarrassed, but Marcus didn't move closer or make it awkward. He simply let her cry, his presence steady, silence compassionate. When she finally lowered her hands, eyes red, Marcus reached into his pocket again and offered her the same folded handkerchief from yesterday. She let out a shaky laugh, accepting. You always carry this around. My mom gave it to me, he said softly. Said a man should always be prepared to help someone wipe their tears. The simple story tugged at her heart. She dabbed her eyes, shaking her head. Raised you well. They fell into another silence, but this one felt different, less heavy, almost comforting. For the first time since Daniel's death, Emily didn't feel like she was drowning alone in grief. Someone else was sitting in the dark with her, and that made the darkness just a little less unbearable. When Marcus finally stood, she felt an unexpected pang. She didn't want him to go. I should let you rest, he said, his tone gentle. But if you need anything, groceries, fixing something around the house, even just company, please, don't hesitate. Emily walked him to the door, her heart torn between gratitude and guilt. She shouldn't need someone this much, this soon. And yet, as he stepped into the rain, she couldn't deny the warmth he had left behind in the hollow of her chest. That night she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. She thought of Daniel as she always did, but another thought kept surfacing. Not of the man she had lost, but of the neighbor who had shown up quietly, carrying soup and silence, and had somehow given her the first fragile taste of comfort since. Her world had fallen apart. Emily pressed her face into Daniel's sweater, whispering into the fabric, I miss you, love. But I don't feel as alone tonight. And for the second night in a row, sleep found her without the sting of endless tears. The weeks passed slowly, each day bleeding into the next. For Emily, time had lost its meaning. Mornings no longer began with Daniel's voice, asking if she wanted coffee, and nights no longer ended with the warmth of his body beside hers. Her world had shrunk to the walls of her home, where memories lurked in every corner, pressing down on her with equal parts love and pain. And yet, there was Marcus. What had started as small visits, checking in, bringing meals, helping with errands, had become a rhythm she quietly began to depend on. At first, Emily told herself it was nothing, just neighborly kindness. A man doing what good people do when someone is grieving. But as the days stretched on, she couldn't deny that she felt lighter when he was near. He repaired the broken section of her backyard fence one afternoon, sleeves rolled up, his broad frame steady as he worked. Emily had stood at the kitchen window, watching him. The hammer's rhythm was soothing, almost hypnotic. But what unsettled her was not the sound of nails being driven into wood. It was the way her eyes lingered on him. She caught herself noticing things she shouldn't. The strength in his arms, the quiet confidence in his movements, the gentle way he smiled when he caught her watching. It made her chest tighten with something she couldn't name, something that felt both wrong and achingly human. That evening, they sat together on the porch, the sun dipping low behind the houses across the street. The air carried the faint scent of cut grass and summer fading into autumn. Emily wrapped her sweater tighter around herself while Marcus leaned back against the railing, his presence calm, grounding. You don't have to do all this, Emily said softly, breaking. The quiet, fixing things, bringing food, sitting here with me. I don't want to be a burden. Marcus turned his head, meeting her gaze. His eyes were steady, deep, the kind that didn't flinch from vulnerability. You're not a burden, Emily. Not even close. I want to be here, and I don't do things out of obligation. I do them because I care." The words landed heavier than she expected. She felt her throat tighten, her breath falter. "I care." How long had it been since someone said those words to her, not in pity, not in passing, but with quiet sincerity? Her pulse quickened. She looked away, out at the darkening street. "It's just, people will talk," she murmured. "They already are. I hear the whispers. I think it's too soon for me, too. To smile, to sit on this porch, to have company." Marcus's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained gentle. "People will always talk. They don't know your heart. They don't know what it feels like to live in this silence every day." Emily's chest ached. His words pierced her defenses, stirring emotions she wasn't ready to face. She turned back to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "I feel guilty, Marcus, even for moments like this. For enjoying your company. It feels like I'm betraying Daniel." Marcus leaned forward slightly, his expression softening. "You're not betraying him. Loving someone doesn't vanish just because life changes. You'll always love Daniel. That doesn't mean you can't also let yourself be cared for now." His words hung in the air between them, heavy and dangerous. Emily felt her heart race, her palms sweat. She wanted to believe him, wanted to sink into the comfort he offered. But the guilt gnawed at her, sharp and relentless. She rose abruptly, needing distance. "I should go inside. Getting late." Marcus stood too, his eyes never leaving hers. For a moment, neither moved. Then, as if pulled by an invisible force, he reached out and gently brushed his fingers against hers. The touch was light, fleeting, but it sent a current through her body so strong she had to steady herself against the porch rail. She froze, caught between the pull of longing and the weight of guilt. "Emily," he whispered, his voice husky with something unspoken. "You don't have to be alone in this." Her breath caught. Her heart wanted to answer him, to close the distance, to let herself feel again. But her mind screamed that it was too soon, too dangerous, too wrong. She pulled her hand back, her voice shaking. "I can't. Not now." Marcus nodded slowly, his jaw tightening, though his eyes held no anger, only understanding, and something deeper. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I didn't mean to push." Emily shook her head, her heart pounding. "You didn't. It's just complicated." "I know," he replied. His gaze lingered on her, full of unspoken things, before he finally stepped back. "Good night, Emily." She watched him walk across the street to his house, the night swallowing his figure. Her chest rose and fell unevenly, her emotions tangled in a storm she hadn't expected. Inside, the house felt emptier than ever. She pressed her back against the door after closing it, her fingers tingling where his hand had touched hers. That night's sleep didn't come easily. She lay awake, torn between guilt and longing. She thought of Daniel, his smile, his laughter, the life they had built together. But she also thought of Marcus, his steady voice, his gentle presence, the way his touch had sparked something inside her she thought had died with her husband. It was wrong, wasn't it? To feel this pull so soon, and yet wasn't it also human? Emily closed her eyes, her heart heavy with confusion. She whispered into the dark as though Daniel could hear her. "I don't know what's happening to me." But deep down, she knew the truth. Something had shifted. Something had awakened. And once stirred, such feelings rarely went back to sleep. The house no longer felt like a home. Emily sat on the edge of her couch, her body wrapped in an oversized sweater that had once belonged to her husband, Daniel. The sleeves still carried the faint scent of his cologne, a fragrance she knew would fade with time, but for now, she buried herself in it, clinging desperately to whatever was left of him. A teacup rested in her hands, the steam long gone cold. She had made it out of habit because Daniel used to love when she prepared tea in the evenings, but she hadn't taken more than a sip. The silence pressed down on her chest, heavier than any weight she'd ever known. Just a day before this, same living room had been full of people, family, friends, neighbors, even distant acquaintances who showed up with casseroles and quiet words of sympathy. Their voices had filled the air with stories about Daniel, kind smiles, and the familiar phrases people always say at funerals. He was such a good man. He lived a full life. You'll be okay in time. But now they were gone. The house was empty, stripped of the comfort their presence had brought. All that lingered was the echo of their words and the hollow ache in her chest. Emily looked around the room, her eyes falling on the framed photographs on the mantel. One in particular made her breath catch Daniel in his fishing hat, smiling proudly with a catch from their trip to the lake 2 summers ago. His laughter was frozen in that picture, a joy she could no longer touch. She set the teacup aside and pulled her knees close to her chest, whispering to herself, "How do I do? This without you, Danny?" That was when the knock came. It startled her so much she nearly dropped the cup. Nobody was supposed to come today. Everyone had already offered their condolences. Everyone had already said their goodbyes. She hesitated, wondering if she should even answer. The knock came again, softer this time, almost hesitant. Her bare feet carried her slowly across the hardwood floor, each step uncertain. She opened the door just a crack, her heart pounding, and when she saw who it was, her breath caught Marcus, her neighbor from across the street. He was standing there with a small bouquet of flowers in his hands, nothing fancy. It's just wildflowers, wrapped in plain brown paper. He looked different than the others who had visited yesterday. His expression wasn't pitying or overly solemn. Instead, his dark eyes carried something steadier, something almost grounding. "Emily," he said, his deep voice soft, careful. "I didn't want to intrude yesterday. I know you had so many people around. But I wanted to check on you today." She blinked at him, her throat tight. For a moment, words refused to come. Finally, she managed. "That's kind of you, Marcus. You didn't have to." "I know," he replied simply, "but I wanted to." He extended the flowers, and with trembling hands, she accepted them. The simple gesture nearly undid her. Her eyes burned as she whispered, "Thank you." For a few seconds, they just stood there, the cool autumn breeze weaving between them. Marcus didn't push his way in, didn't overwhelm her with questions. He just waited, his presence calm, as though he was giving her the space to choose whether she wanted company or solitude. Something inside Emily, fragile and aching, decided. She stepped back and opened the door wider. "Would you like to come in?" Marcus nodded once and stepped inside, his large frame moving quietly through the familiar entryway. He had lived across the street for nearly 10 years. And though they had exchanged pleasantries, many times waves in the driveway, quick conversations while mowing lawns, he had never crossed the threshold of her home before. Emily placed the flowers in a vase, her fingers fumbling slightly. She felt exposed, vulnerable, yet at the same time a strange warmth stirred in her chest. As if his presence carried a piece of comfort she didn't know she needed, they sat in the living room, the silence stretching between them. But it wasn't the heavy silence she had endured all morning. It was gentler, easier somehow. Emily found herself speaking without planning to, her words spilling into the quiet. Yesterday felt like a blur, she confessed, her voice breaking. So many people, so many voices. But today, it's just me. I don't know what to do with the emptiness. Marcus leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. His gaze never wavered. "Grief, it's a strange companion," he said softly. "Loud one moment, silent the next. But it's never easy." His words landed with weight, not as advice, but as truth. She studied him then, noticing the lines etched around his eyes, the steadiness in his expression. He wasn't trying to fix her pain. He wasn't filling the air with cliches. He was just present. And that alone felt like a lifeline. Emily's eyes fell to her hands, twisting in her lap. Daniel was my everything. I don't know how to be anyone without him. Marcus's voice was quiet, almost a whisper. You don't have to figure that out today. Today, it's enough to just breathe. The simplicity of his words unraveled her. A tear slid down her cheek, followed by another until her vision blurred. She covered her face with her hands, embarrassed by her own weakness. Without a word, Marcus reached into his pocket and handed her a folded handkerchief. She accepted it, dabbing her eyes, and for the first time since the funeral, she let herself cry openly. Not because someone demanded stories about Daniel, not because people wanted her to be strong, but because someone finally gave her the space to simply grieve. They didn't speak much after that. Marcus sat quietly, his presence steady beside her. When he finally rose to leave, he didn't linger or make promises he couldn't keep. He just said, "If you need anything at all, you know where I am." Emily walked him to the door, her chest still heavy but not as suffocating as before. When the door closed behind him, she leaned against it, closing her eyes. For the first time since Daniel's passing, she realized she had gone an hour without feeling completely alone. That night, when she finally climbed into bed, the silence was still there. The ache was still sharp. There was something new, something small but undeniable. A warmth fragile as a flickering candle, reminding her that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she thought. And for the first time in days, Emily fell asleep without tears on her pillow. Emily sat by the window, watching the drizzle beat against the glass and streak downward in uneven lines. The world outside seemed muted, streets damp and quiet, trees bending slightly under the weight of water. Normally, she loved rain. Daniel used to joke that rainy days were her favorite excuse to stay in pajamas and bake cookies. But now, it's only made the house feel darker, emptier. Her phone sat untouched on the coffee table. A few unread messages blinked on the screen, neighbors checking in. Her sister offering to come over, a cousin reminding her to stay strong. Emily didn't have the energy to answer. Everyone's words felt the same, kind but distant. They tried to console her, but none of them could reach the raw place inside her chest that ached for Daniel. So when a knock came again, she startled. This time, she knew immediately who it might be. She opened the door, and there was Marcus. He wasn't holding flowers today. Instead, he carried a small paper bag and an umbrella dripping with rain. He gave her a gentle smile. "I brought you something warm," he said, lifting the bag slightly. "Chicken soup from that diner downtown. Thought you might not feel like cooking." Emily blinked, her throat tightening unexpectedly. "That's thoughtful of you." "Nothing," Marcus replied, but his eyes softened. "May I come in, just for a little while?" She hesitated, then nodded. Inside. The house was still, carrying the faint scent of yesterday's untouched tea. Emily cleared a space on the coffee table, embarrassed at the clutter of sympathy cards and half-empty cups. Marcus set down the bag, pulling out 2 steaming containers of soup. "You didn't have to bring 2, she said quietly, almost apologetic. No, he answered. "But I thought you might not want to eat alone." Those words struck her. She hadn't realized until then how heavy the silence of meals had become. The night before, she had eaten only a piece of bread sitting in the dim kitchen, unable to bear the empty chair across from her. Now, the simple act of sharing soup felt like more kindness than she could put into words. They sat together on the couch, spoons clinking softly against the plastic bowls. For a while, neither spoke. Emily found herself focusing on the warmth of the soup, the way it spread through her chest, chasing away the chill that had lingered since Daniel's funeral. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. "I know what it's like, you know?" Emily looked at him, surprised. "What do you mean?" "My mother," he said after a pause. His voice was low, steady. "I lost her when I was 19, cancer. My father was already gone by then, so it was just me." Emily set her spoon down, listening intently. She hadn't known this about Marcus. He wasn't the type to share personal things. He continued, his gaze fixed on the rain outside the window. For a long time, people tried to comfort me. They'd tell me she was in a better place or that I was strong enough to get through it. But none of that helped. The only thing that helped was when someone just sat with me. No fixing, no advice, just presence. His words lingered in the air, heavy but soothing. Emily's chest tightened as tears welled in her eyes.